1, 2, 3, 4.
News,
culture, astronomy,
physics,
humanities,
space,
science, travel,
Boom! Knowledge! Boom! Knowledge!
History.
humor,
technology,
Games.
Hello, friends. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are on this magnificent Goldilocks-centered space orb. And welcome to Boom Knowledge. It's a podcast hyper-focused on edutainment across an absurdly varied subject landscape. History, travel, culture, giant robots, horrific aquatic abominations, stand-up and stand-out human beings, medical science, physical science, space science, food science, people science, also art, so much art. I'm your host, Mike Vass. Truly good to have you here. Welcome to the show. I'm riding an extra tasty wave of elation because last week I made the shift from working in a well-furnished lone wolf cave to including talented, smart, saucy individuals who have no shortage of incendiary material to apply to the knowledge explosion. I've recorded 3 interviews at this point, with even more scheduled to happen very soon. Posted the first last week on Friday with Edie Marshall, who I must thank once more for really getting the ball rolling in the decidedly right direction. So yes, expect more unique voices on BoomKnow going forward. I'll be liberally sprinkling interviews into the program schedule in the days, weeks, months, heck, I'm not going anywhere, so let's just say years to come. Also, if things sound a little different, well, that's because I've moved the whole BoomKnow operation out of my office and into the Monster Manor recording studio. Better mics, better room, just plain better overall. I'm not going to lie to you, though, because we don't have that kind of relationship, you and I. This week has kind of sucked. Between my seasonal depression, which I chatted about back in episode 8, and my ongoing battles with technology, well, things will certainly get better from here on out, I'm sure, but balls to this week. It's been a rough one, and that is why you're hearing me on a Saturday instead of a Tuesday or a Thursday. On the plus side, I am getting better with my tech woes, and I also bought myself a therapy light, which I also mentioned as a thing in episode 8. Podcast purveyor, heal thyself. I'll let you know how it goes. Anyway, I'm back to my loner rebel, you wouldn't want to get mixed up with a guy like me ways. It's the return of the classic format, digging into a couple of topics in relative depth, then following it up with the listener-driven Frag List. First on the docket today, twins. You think you're going to get one person and bam! Nature throws you a second at no extra charge. Well, actually, lots of extra charge. Surprise! Thanks, nature. We will talk about how twins happen, what types exist, some of their more famous examples and behaviors, and all the delights associated with doubling it up. Also, going to chat about art, specifically, and I credit listener JP in Raleigh, North Carolina for this topic suggestion. We're going to examine the strange and shady world of forgery. Scandalous. So let's put the finishing touches and final brush strokes on this total sham of an introduction. Pull that puppy off the pedestal, toss it over the shoulder and into the growing for sale pile, and pull out a new canvas. We'll freshen up the artist palette with some bronze, crimson, dark cyan, heliotrope, mummy's tomb. No, really, these are all actual color names. Rinse out the brushes, relight the candles because people, we are creating. And add the first strokes to a masterwork called Show. A one-of-a-kind original by master painter Mike it's been done before. Let's paint us some knowledge. Nature is just full of surprises. Really, when you get right down to brass tacks, it has taken an unfathomable series of events to bring particles, atoms, elements, molecules, compounds, the planets, our specific planet, the spark of life, many thousands of years of evolution, human beings, countless generations of parents, and us into existence. Depending on your definition of the term, well, it is truly a miraculous thing. And as if that wasn't enough, sometimes nature doubles on up, or triples, and in some extreme cases, even turns human birth into more of a litter of babies experience. Twins are friggin' cool. But how do they happen in the first place? What biological roll of the dice is needed to double the payout? In order to answer that question, we need to dig in on the different types of twins. We'll start with two that you're already familiar with. The most common, of course, are identical or monozygotic and fraternal or dizygotic. And that mono or dizygotic phrase is a key to understanding at least a component of the mechanics that bring twins into being. The word zygote comes from our old friends, the incredibly super smart Greeks. It is derived from the word zygotos, which means joined or yoked. Hey baby, want to get yoked? Gross. The zygote is formed when male sperm and female ovum combine to make a single cell. In the case of fraternal twins, which are generally the equivalent of common siblings who share a womb and are born at the same time, two separate eggs and thus two zygotes are fertilized by separate sperm cells. Di being two, zygotic referring to zygote. Dizygotic. Got it. Fraternal twins are the most common type of twinning, which as a side note, I love that word. Hey pal, how's your pregnancy going? Oh, my pregnancy? Twinning! Actually, it's more like, oh, my pregnancy? Twinning. Fraternal twins can be boy-boy, girl-girl, or a mix of the sexes, sharing 50% of their DNA, same as any other sibling. That means fraternal twins can look alike and share some characteristics, or totally not at all. Again, just like any brothers or sisters you would find anywhere. Interestingly enough, fraternal twinning can occur with two different fathers a few days apart. This potentially scandalous process, and I say potentially because the world is increasingly a more widely accepted spectrum of relationship and family types. Well, it's known as superfecundation. The woman releases multiple eggs and one partner does the duty, followed by another at a later, but not too much later date. This has resulted in more than a few paternity suits. Super awkward. A number of factors can lead to an increase in fraternal twinning potential. Heredity, the age of the mother, with above 35 being a real culprit that actually fully doubles the potential. Birth control, diet, and taking fertility drugs. In some rare cases, fertility drugs in particular have led to the production of a lot of eggs. Remember Octomom? Yeah, I tried to forget about her too. And there are some other interesting statistics about fraternal twinning as well. If you are yourself a fraternal twin, your chance of having twins is 1 in 17. Way better than your chance of being a winning gambler or lottery player. Your chances are also affected by your ethnic background. White Americans and Europeans have a 1 in 69 chance in twinning. Black Americans, 1 in 60. Japanese, 1 in 160. Chinese, 1 in 250, and on and on and on in this way. Where you're from has a big effect. The second most common type of twin is the identical. Monozygotic twins come from a single egg and a single sperm which form one zygote, which eventually splits in two. The exact mechanism that creates this situation is unknown. There are only theories. But some things are certain. Heredity has no known effect. The process is essentially random. And they are almost always male-male or female-female, though mutation can occur, leading to identicals that are actually different sexes. Now, identical twins are genetically very similar, but not in total. There can be differences in DNA detected in the white blood cells. Perhaps more intriguingly, environmental factors can activate or deactivate certain genes. And it's quite common for identical twins to have more differences as they age. And even more intriguing still, about a quarter of all identical twins are actually mirror images of each other, which can occur as a function of early splitting of the egg. The left side of one twin will mirror the right side of the other, and vice versa, which is totally weird and actually quite wonderful, and I myself will be compelled to see if I really notice that in identical twins I meet going forward, without being a total creep about it, of course. There are other twinning variations as well. Parasitic, which results in one twin being born healthy while the other ceases development during gestation. Can't think of an example? Well, go back and watch Quato in Total Recall. And I mean the Verhoeven and Schwarzenegger original, if you please. Quaid. Chimerism refers to a person where some of their parts come from their twin. A chimera can be intersex with cells from both a male and a female twin. Now, conjoined twins are monozygotic, where separation was not fully completed. And amazingly, this happens in 1 in 50,000 pregnancies. Again, way better odds than getting a big lotto jackpot. Now, much has been made about the special connection of some twins, particularly a disposition to extrasensory perception. While there are certainly many anecdotal cases of telepathic connection, scientific study has not produced any specific evidence of psychic phenomena. It is perhaps more likely that information is simply derived from spending a great amount of time with someone and knowing them particularly well. The same perceived deep connection occurs with close friends, non-twin family members, and married couples. This is further amplified by coincidence. If you feel that something is wrong and, by way of example, end up saving a person's life based on said feeling, then the assumption is deeper forces were at work. But maybe you felt that way many times before and all was well. The presence of actual danger may be explained by coincidence and your knowledge of the other person's behaviors, habits, and so forth. But it feels otherworldly at the time. Or hell, maybe there is a psychic connection. Who am I to say for certain? There could be deeper forces at work that may eventually be teased out by science, but so far, not so much. One thing that is certain is that twins often develop language skills later than the single-born population. Now, it isn't 100% clear why, but one leading theory suggests that twins will develop their own secret language early on, one that only they can understand. And of course, identical twins are often dressed alike as well. There's some debate on whether this is a healthy or unhealthy process. Perceived benefits of identical dress are convenience, cost, and, well, vanity. Identical twins draw more attention naturally, something that certain parents may get a particular kick out of. Whether the twins get the same kick, well, that remains to be seen. And actually, this phenomena can persist or diverge. I know a set of identical twins that share a touch of the same community, but dress very different from each other and actually are really different people in most ways. I also once knew a set of identical female Asian twins who were also totally gothed out, as in they both wore black lace and vampy makeup, and, well, for yours truly, that was actually pretty freaking awesome. Dressing separately, particularly early on, can define individual identity. It all just depends on the personalities of the twins involved. That separate identity can evolve over time as they get older as well. Or they turn into a pair of easy-on-the-eyes goth kids, whichever. No matter how you slice the egg or fertilize multiples from however many partners, the biological processes that create twins are fascinating and more common than I would have thought before looking at the stats. Now, before we close out this segment, a couple more fun facts. 35% of twins are left-handed, which is double the rate of the general population. And children of identical twins, well, they're genetically half-sibling. Now, here's my favorite. If identical twins marry identical twins, which has some historical precedent, well, their children are legally considered cousins, but genetically, they're full siblings. That is so delightfully bizarre. I absolutely love me some art. Or anyway, I love what I love, which tends to be modern, surrealist, comic book, interactive, sculpture of a certain ilk. And I really like Van Gogh. Heck, I've even made some art myself. Large-scale interactive, to be exact. Most recently with the Smarty Pants group of friends for the 2016 Burning Man Festival. And if you consider music to be art for the ears, well, I've made plenty of that as well. Now, my baseline assumption until I researched this segment as both an artist and a fan, without having thought about it too much prior, was that every last piece of art I've seen in my life, unless otherwise specified, was largely a one-of-a-kind original. But you know what? I was probably wrong. Very, very wrong. For a number of reasons. First and foremost, art forgery is likely a lot more common than most people realize. Experts have claimed 20%, 50%, and possibly an even higher percentage of art in the marketplace is fake. Yes, that absolutely includes established museums. Back in 2014, Jan Walther, the chief of Geneva-based Fine Art Expert Institute, stated that approximately 70 to 90% of all art they examine on behalf of collectors and dealers ended up being not by the artist claimed. These results came from X-rays, infrared scans, and radiocarbon dating. At €15,000 a pop to find out, it's not a cheap method, especially when it turns out you're holding on to a fake. So how did we get here? Let's start by taking a quick spin in the gold leaf-encrusted Wayback Machine, the one with the authentic 15th century murals painted on its ceilings, because only the best for me and my listeners. We start with the Romans. Brilliant artists in their own right, yet at times also total fakers from Fake Town who could be found forging masterpieces first created by the Greeks. The bold tradition of fakery, or emulation if you prefer, goes back more than 2,000 years. And yes, it is believed that some of these forgeries were in fact passed off as originals to unsuspecting buyers. But forgery does in fact have more noble roots as well. In order to learn from the masters, masters themselves would put technique into practice by making copies. We travel forward to the Renaissance, when painters took on apprentices who, in the spirit of training, would create copies of their master's work as tributes, which would then be sold above board to help pay for that training. And when you think about it, the practice of paying for a copy isn't really different than paying for print in modern times. I have a couple of wonderfully bizarre H.R. Giger prints, and I know for certainty that they aren't originals, but I love them all the same. I hang them in my office and bask in their weirdness. And I might enjoy them even a tiny bit more if I knew they were faithful reproductions by Giger's own apprentice. They're not, of course, but I get the appeal of that. Artists during the Renaissance created all kinds of imitations of earlier styles, as well as their contemporaries, and fair enough. It's right there in the word itself. Renaissance literally means rebirth. Now, skipping up a few years, no less an artist than Michelangelo himself was a known forger. In a famous instance of fraud, he created a Cupid that he treated with an acidic earth to make it appear ancient. He sold it to a dealer, who in turn sold it to a cardinal, who would later learn the sculpture was a fake and demand his money back, rightly so. Now, Michelangelo got to keep his share of the money, presumably for just being Michelangelo. And he was also purported to have made perfect copies of drawings, which he would smoke and tint to give the appearance of age. And supposedly, he kept the originals for himself. Bold, right? Now, by the 19th and 20th century, forgery is becoming positively rampant. Dozens of artists, including Dali, Picasso, and Van Gogh, became extremely susceptible to fakery, forged to such an extent that each and every work was, and is still really, subject to scrutiny. And the distinctions between legitimate copies and forgeries is often blurred, only truly definable through an intent to profit and obvious subterfuge. If you create a fake and sell it as an original, you're a forger. If you discover something is fake and pass it off as an original, again, you're a forger. Heck, you can even become famous as a forger, as was the case for Elmir Dahuri, who has both a book written about him and a movie by Orson Welles. F is for fake. Dahuri had an uncanny ability to mimic the style of famous artists. He sold over 1,000 such forgeries to reputable galleries all over the world before finally being uncovered. Thousands. But uncovered he was. In the good old days, it took clever examination. But these days, well, forensics has made this a far easier endeavor. Of course, if you can afford the process. Again, we'll harken back to that 15,000 euro to get an answer. It's a lot. And all this is leading me to a big question. If art being enjoyed is agreed upon to have been created by a specific individual, yet the actual version you are observing was in fact expertly recreated by someone else, either an homage or to make a buck, and you don't know, how much does it matter? Does perceived value ultimately affect enjoyment? Now, as a collector, it certainly can affect your pocketbook. No question about that. But what about how you feel about the art itself? A thing meant presumably to move the beholder in some manner or another. There's no grand overarching all-knowing council of art to tell you. Nor is there a grand overarching all-knowing council of money for that matter either. Value is perceived, flexible, shifting. Oh sure, there are many forces and bits of attribution that contribute, subjectively or systemically, to economic value. But ultimately, it's all completely made up by us human beings. Not to sound like a stoned college kid, but it's all a construct, man. So let's recap. 20 to 90% of art that is believed to have come from the hand of the artist, depending on the marketplace, is in fact likely fake. People have been faking it for a couple of thousands of years, including so-called legitimate artists, for reasons noble and nefarious. There is lots of money to be made in fakery, and lots of money to be made in the process of sniffing out the fakes. The value of art is a construct, as is the value of money. Conclusion? Society is a lie. I have a couple of guests coming up in various facets of the art world, and I plan to ask them their opinion on the subject of forgery. Sure, I'm going to get some pretty interesting answers, and I cannot friggin' wait for that. Okay, on to the Frag List. Well, this first one is chilling and heartwarming both. I don't know any other way to describe it. A soccer ball carried by mission specialist Ellison Onizuka on the Space Shuttle Challenger, which of course broke apart in 1986, tragically killing everyone aboard. Well, that ball finally made it into space. It was retrieved from the wreckage intact in the Atlantic Ocean all those years back and given to Clear Lake High School, where it originated. And it had been signed by the Clear Lake High School girls and boys team, of which Onizuka's daughter was a member. It has now been carried to the International Space Station by astronaut Shane Kimbrough, whose son attends Clear Lake now. 30 years later, the soccer ball is finally in space. Next up, coming from listener and dear old friend Jason in Bend, Oregon, who clearly knows me, sharks love metal. And actually, I think I remember reading this at the time as a metal fan. It's a story that's a couple of years old, but it bears a wonderful repeat in any case, especially since I have a show now, and I didn't have one back then. A Discovery Channel film crew hunting a female great white shark named, and I love this, Joan of Shark, managed to instead catch the attention of two males by submerging a speaker and blasting some metal. Apparently the sharks are drawn towards the vibrations, which I get. Me too, shark guys. I actually enjoyed this story for another reason as well. The documentary and accompanying internet stories all use the term death metal to describe what was played at the Sharks. And while not everyone knows or cares, us metal people certainly know the difference. Darkest Era, the band being played, is heavy metal, with some folk and doom origins in the earlier material especially, But death? No way. I'm sure sharks probably like death too. And on the almost other end of the hard music spectrum, they have been known to go for AC/DC. Us metal people, we get pretty into our specificity and subgenreing, as I've also talked about on the show in the past. And finally, we'll head into orbit again and tie it all back into the show's art theme. The first ever off-Earth sculpture has been produced. It's a 3D printed piece entitled Laugh, a collaboration between an Israeli artist and the California company Made in Space, which owns and operates the ISS commercially available 3D printer. More than 100,000 people submitted a Laugh Star, which is a digital 3D model of sound waves made when a person laughs. I love this one so much across every dimension. And Jane Starko of Las Vegas was chosen as the winner. Her model was beamed up to the ISS and printed out on Friday, February 10th, 2016. I wonder what it's worth. That's the end of this here Boom Knowledge, and if you liked what you heard, you should totally subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. Simply search for Boom Knowledge in iTunes or on your favorite iDevice and hit the subscribe button. Or you can find me on Stitcher, or you can find RSS feeds on my website in addition to more handy-dandy subscribe links. That's www.boomknow.com. BOOMKNOW. Have a great week. Stay cool, stay comfy, stay creative, and I will actually, for sure, see you in a couple of days in the future.
Boom Knowledge.